Hey, and welcome to the Solid Verbal. Now would be a perfect time to consider subscribing. Yeah, that little subscribe button for year-round premium college football content. That's it. Here's the video. Enjoy. Subscribe.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt, that fine gentleman. To my left, the one, the only, still the incomparable Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Have had family in town the last few days, and it's one of those things where you can't wait till they show up, but you can't. I'm not going to say I can't wait till they go back home, but you can't wait until you get back into your normal routine. And so had a great morning, a great shower. My coffee has been hitting just like I want it to, and we've got a news/discussion show this morning as we record this, it has me especially juiced. I'm not going to lie, Ty. I am excited and enthusiastic to discuss topics and making cases and arguing cases and getting to the bottom of things, Ty. I love that we have this opportunity to not just preview games, recap games, get excited for games. We're just like, let's take a second and figure things out together. I like that.
Let's take a deep breath together here in the Verballerhood. Welcome one, welcome all. Thank you for coming on back. Week 3 getting a little bit bigger in the window, but before we get there, as Dan mentioned, yes, we've got news, we've got a game, we've got all sorts of fun stuff planned for this very episode, which of course is driven by our good friends over at Geico. Verballers.com is where you can sign up for exclusive access and Solid Verbal Live.
Oh, yeah.
Solid Verbal Live, speaking of getting big in the window, we have to put together our concept, and we have to announce that before the end of this week. Can we do that?
Yes. Can confirm that we have that capability. Yeah, we have. I think we have a good sketch, but we need to nail it down. Yeah.
SolidVerbalLive.com. Come and see us in New York, October
it's gonna be
the 7th at Chelsea Music Hall. We are excited about it. We have not done a whole lot of shows during the season.
No.
So if you're out there and if you're on the fence and you're like, I saw these knuckleheads in person already. Once was enough for me.
Full new show, new concept. It's the end of the week. It's week 6 is the next day. That's Saturday. Come on out. SmellTysHair.com for more information on live show tickets. New York, Connecticut, New Jersey. Anybody who can get to, well, I guess it's sort of lower-ish Manhattan. Chelsea is just beneath Midtown. Great food, great verballers, decent hosts. It's all happening.
SolidVerbalLive.com. Dan, should we get to news?
Let's.
We have breaking news!
Boop, 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 boop. Do it like in this moment, or is it just...
Nah, it's sort of a recap.
Okay.
Scott Frost is now officially fired. It was one of those deals on Sunday afternoon where, hey, we recorded the podcast. Oh, snap. We have to interject some sort of commentary to make sure that this show doesn't go obsolete the second it hits people's devices.
Yeah.
It is an occupational hazard here on the Solid Verbal, and really anybody in on-demand media that these types of things happen seemingly earlier and earlier each year in the college football season. But as you know, Nebraska loses to Georgia Southern. Lo and behold, after week 2, second year in a row now where we had a rather prominent head football coach relieved of command. Scott Frost relieved of that command at Nebraska by athletic director Trev Alberts. Notably, if he had waited like 4 weeks, they'd have saved $8 million or some sort of crazy figure, because that point was October 1st. The buyout went down from one exorbitant sum to another.
Yeah.
Alas, they decide they cannot wait. We did talk about it a little bit on an emergency video, that you and I recorded and posted out to YouTube, but we have not had a chance to reconvene on the matter here on the podcast. So, look, not a great surprise. We saw the writing on the wall, not just after last season, not just after Northwestern, but certainly after the loss to Georgia Southern. The focus is not now on, wow, can you believe Scott Frost got canned? It is, well, which direction are they going to go next? And we've heard some interesting names, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, I saw it reported that Matt Campbell is the first focus of the targeting process for the new head coach of Nebraska. And why wouldn't you target Matt Campbell? He's a very, very good coach who especially taking a place that has been somewhat down traditionally, and Nebraska has arguably been somewhat down recently, and turning the culture around, unearthing NFL caliber players to win big games in a major conference. So why wouldn't you target Matt Campbell, who seems very happy in Ames, Iowa? But yeah, we've seen Lance Leipold. Obviously, the Urban Meyer chatter is going to come up with any big or semi-big job that comes up. Prominent assistants that come up. Lane Kiffin, like all of the usual names have come up. I think it's an interesting job where you can win a bunch of games. And at this point, if you were to tell Nebraska fans, hey, this coach is going to come in and you're going to go to bowl games often and you're going to enjoy watching your team, though you're probably not going to win the Big Ten, but you'll have a good chance to win the division a lot of years. I think a lot of the more balanced Nebraska fans would say, cool, can't wait.
Yeah.
Cool, that'd be rad. So I think it's a good job. I think it's a job where there's nothing turnkey about it. But if you come in and you say, here's how we're going to recruit the Midwest and Texas and whatever, and here's how we're going to attack the portal, and here's how we're going to build our program. These are the types of assistants that we're going to hire and pay handsomely with all of that sweet Big Ten cash. I think you can win a bunch of games.
Yeah.
I don't think it is a job that is forever uphill. And I'm not saying anything that smart Nebraska fans don't already know. You can win a bunch of games in Lincoln, Nebraska.
I would agree with that. And let me address one of the common misconceptions out there about Nebraska fans. Nebraska fans aren't out here saying we should be winning the national championship every year. We should be contending for the championship every year. Most of the people, I'm sure there are some of those. Every fan base has those.
Yep.
I would say 95% of the Nebraska people that have tweeted, that have emailed, that have called in, have all been in that what I would consider smart bucket that you just described.
Sure.
They just don't want to be frustrated every week. They know that there is more out there. They know that this team should be playing to a higher standard, and they are frustrated that they have not gotten there. But this notion that some may have who listen to this show, like, do they really expect to win the national? No, they don't.
No.
They just know that they're better than 3-9 from a year ago. They know that they should be better in close game situations than they've been. They know that the mistakes, they know that so much of what they've seen over the last couple seasons is really freaking frustrating, and that they should at least be better than that. And I agree. I agree. If you're a fan of a team that loses, again, 9 games like they did a year ago by single digits, and oh, by the way, more this year, you know that you should expect a little bit more. You should aspire for greater heights, especially in the Big Ten West. So Matt Campbell's an interesting name. As you said, it is the reason for the season now that every coach with potential Midwestern roots, cousins in the Midwest, would be associated with this job. We'll see where it goes. My hunch is that we'll hear a lot more about it here in the coming days and weeks. But for the interim, Scott Frost is gone, and we will talk more about the interesting game/point spread as it relates to Oklahoma and Nebraska on the preview show that we record tomorrow. But some interesting line movement there that we need to discuss.
All right, fair enough. Ooh, my alarm is going off. I'm not making pizza dough at the moment. The other thing I want to touch on is just in relation to the Nebraska job in general. As we exist today in early to mid-September, Iowa's not going in the right direction. Wisconsin's not going in the right direction. Minnesota seems promising, but we don't really have a good outlook on what they look like in the long term in terms of challenging for that division, because that's the first obstacle, winning the Big Ten West. And so Nebraska is saying to themselves, we can hire somebody good enough to win the Big Ten West, to recruit good enough players and win enough games to win the big. Like, what is the medium-term outlook right now? Wisconsin fans are not happy at all.
No.
You see the term backsliding a lot when you look at the Wisconsin online digital community conversation. And Iowa, of course, obviously is a joke on offense at the moment with nothing, maybe they'll get a healthier receiver or something like that in the short term, but it's not like we're looking at Iowa as, oh, they're always just going to be in the way of Nebraska. No, that does not have to be the case if we can be realistic. And so I know there's been like, why didn't Nebraska wait? Why didn't they wait until October 1st for the buyout to go down? Do you ever have too much money, Ty? Do you ever have too much money?
I have not had that problem. I don't know about you. I've never had that problem.
Here's what Nebraska has right now. They have too much money and a lot of angry people making demands. Is it your money?
No.
Is Nebraska? Is it anybody? Not my money. It's only Nebraska. They can do whatever they want with it. And this is where the sport is right now. And so if they say to themselves, you know what? We know that the buyout goes down in a month and we can save $7 or $8 million. It's not the sport.
Doesn't
we're
matter.
watching.
Doesn't
That's
matter. But what
not
you're saying is
the
Nebraska's
sport.
got Ted Danson money.
They have Ted Danson money. They can do whatever they want with it. Not my cash, not your cash. And if they felt that the program would go into a much deeper hole that whoever they hire as the next coach is going to have to dig more out of because of keeping Scott Frost around for another 3 weeks, that guys are going to leave, that donors are going to stop donating, that people are going to stop showing up for their precious sellout streak, do it. Throw money at the problem. We talked about this when the Big Ten was going to sign its deal.
Yep.
That the point of making this much money to a lot of these teams is throw money at problems that they feel money can fix. And if you're going to be a down program that gets paid a lot of money, throw that money at a problem and hope it does the thing. That's all.
In the words of the notorious B.I.G., mo money, mo problems.
Yeah.
That is where we're at in college football. Speaking of Big Ten West storylines, not named Scott Frost, we have an answer to our Michigan quarterback controversy, our quarterback question, Dan.
Yes. It seems J.J. McCarthy is at least going to start this week. Is he not?
Correct. That is correct. J.J. McCarthy in limited action, right? They've been doing a bit of a timeshare. Limited action looked really good. Really, really good. Cade McNamara came in this most recent game, did not look that good. Threw an interception, as we talked about on the recap show. Also appeared very frustrated. Who wouldn't be? Led him to a Big Ten championship, beat your hated rival, and went to the playoff last season. I understand where Cade McNamara is coming from. I also understand where Jim Harbaugh is coming from, albeit a bit of an unconventional, out in the air, out for the public type of quarterback competition, but nonetheless does appear as if J.J. McCarthy is going to get that nod, and we'll see. We'll talk more about that as we go through this episode, will we not?
Yeah, I haven't seen a specific quote from Jim Harbaugh, but by the time you may listen to this, it's going to be J.J. McCarthy. So, yeah, we'll have that conversation about J.J. McCarthy, and if and when that's official, but it seems like it's official, have a conversation about what that means for the short, medium, long-term outlook of Michigan football. And as we stated before the season began, this was all just a ruse to do right by Cade McNamara, and as much as you can, with also indicating it's J.J. McCarthy's job to lose and what he looked like against Hawaii. And, buddy, Hawaii is a great defense to have a proving ground game against.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was his. As soon as Cade McNamara last year was pulled in that playoff game, and it was 24-7 at half or something like that. There was not a strong indication from the sideline and from the coaching staff. You know what, Cade's our guy, and we have our ups and downs. He's our guy. That wasn't the case.
No,
that wasn't the case, and
never.
Especially with how J.J. McCarthy looked in relief when the game was out of hand. I get it. Against Georgia, the wheels were moving in that direction.
They most certainly were. Okay.
Yeah.
In more Midwestern quarterback strife, Tyler Buchner down for the count. Tyler Buchner has a shoulder injury. He will require surgery. His recovery time is about 4 months, which means he is out for the year, which means it is Drew Pine time in South Bend. Dan Rubenstein. This is, of course, on the heels of the Marshall loss, on the heels of the Ohio State loss, on the heels of really unbridled optimism around Notre Dame football all offseason long. Suddenly, you look at the schedule, as you and I did on our phone call yesterday.
Yeah.
Suddenly, you start to zoom out and widen the aperture a bit, and you notice that this could be a rough go for Notre Dame if they don't get their offensive line in order, if they can't find a way to put more points on the board, look better on offense. This could be a much more interesting Notre Dame season than I had bargained for at the time that I was just jumping through imaginary hoops with excitement over Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees and where this program could go in the short term. So
yeah,
buckle up is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's going to have to be... look, you watch Notre Dame games a lot closer than I do. It's hard to see how Notre Dame wins a bunch of games this year. And they were never probably going to win 10 games with Tyler Buchner, especially after losing to Marshall. But the path forward for Notre Dame to look good right now appears to be offensive line needs to get a lot better, a lot quicker than they've looked early on this season. They're going to need to run the ball and play defense, because to put the season on Drew Pine's arm, head, shoulder, torso, whatever, knees and toes is asking a lot. And yeah, I think expectations were reasonable given that Marcus Freeman was an internal hire. So he had the awareness and he had the backing of the program, and he was able to keep some of the coaching staff that he wanted together and brought in his own guys elsewhere. They're like, all right, this is Marcus Freeman's team. This is, his comfort level is pretty high with Notre Dame after a year as defensive coordinator. I think it's going to be a slog. Like right now at 0-2 with Drew Pine, which, maybe Drew Pine's, there have been surprises, right?
Sure.
That you're not super high on Drew Pine, but that doesn't mean when he is established as the guy and gets more comfortable with the ones that he can't show things that you weren't expecting.
No, absolutely. And I mean, he's a smaller dude, and I don't think in terms of like a long-term answer at quarterback, I don't think Drew Pine is that answer, but Drew Pine in spots last year, and I emphasize in spots last year, came in and gave them a spark off the bench. He was able to provide that, and he definitely plays with an exuberance that on some level is probably contagious, might help energize the offense a bit. So I don't want to rule out that Notre Dame under Drew Pine can be good, can finish 9-3, 8-4, something like that. But it's really just it's a bummer of a turn for Buchner, who waited his turn admirably last season and did well in limited duty. Clearly, he had some learning and some maturing to do here in the early going based on what we saw in the first two games. It's not all his fault, but, some of that burden is for sure on him. And so to see him go down in this manner, second game of the year, out for the year is a big-time bummer. You hope Drew Pine steps up and can give them a little bit more pop on offense. Everything that I read about Drew Pine in the preseason, in spring practice, in that circuit, was that Drew Pine couldn't stop throwing interceptions.
Well, that is an issue. Yeah.
Could be an issue. And we saw one of those. Saw one of those in the game against Marshall. So you hope that he improves, maybe with added reps with the first team that can get better. But this is all to say that Notre Dame definitely has a challenge in front of it. We looked at the schedule yesterday when you and I talked. I mean, you can look at this thing right now and say North Carolina, BYU, Stanford, Syracuse, Clemson, USC. What is that, 5-6 games that suddenly look much more losable than they did at the start of the season before we knew what Notre Dame was, frankly.
Yeah.
So, again, I will root for Notre Dame. I will give Drew Pine. I will give Marcus Freeman. I will give them the benefit of the doubt and some time to grow into their new roles, but could be a bumpy ride here.
Yeah, maybe we should start taking a look at what CJ Carr's GPA looks like in terms of reclassifying. What is his credit situation if we are a Notre Dame staff?
Is it too late to get into that AP history class?
Is he, did he get that GPA up? Is he ready to roll?
Can you reclassify mid-semester?
Yeah, so suddenly he might be the most popular Notre Dame-ish player at the moment. Well, that's 2024, correct?
Yeah.
So... yeah, Notre Dame missed out on the quarterback. Oregon was able to get a commitment from Dante Moore, who that looks like a bigger whiff at the moment, although Tyler Buchner might, be that guy. But we could have a situation not unlike what we talked about with Michigan, where we say, okay, Tyler Buchner is going to start against blah-blah-blah in game 1. CJ Carr is starting against blah-blah-blah in game 2. That could be in the cards somewhere down the line. But in the short term, things are looking, to me, a little bit bleak. I live in Notre Dame country. I have my ear to the streets, Ty.
Of course.
A little bit bleak at the moment. Anything else news-wise that stands
Quinn
out?
Ewers.
I was going to say, yeah.
Quinn Ewers not out for the year. Will miss some time, about a month and a half. 4 to 6 weeks is what they're saying with that strained clavicle, but in practical matters like a strained AC or SC joint, whatever is up there. He went down hard on his non-throwing shoulder. Quinn Ewers will be back at earliest in time for that Oklahoma game a little bit later this season. Meanwhile, Hudson Card is also day-to-day with a bit of a bum ankle, which presents an interesting challenge for Texas this week. At home, letdown spot against UTSA. UTSA is a good team. I I'm not going to pick UTSA to win that game. The point spread's about 10, 11 points right now. But it is a good team that can certainly challenge Texas on some level. And Texas potentially being down to their third string quarterback, a redshirt freshman named Charles Wright. Clearly he is Chaz Wright on this show.
Yeah. He's
never thrown a college pass. That could be interesting. Like, Texas is probably good enough to win with the other talent on the field, but you can't take defense for granted given what we saw last season. And UTSA is a good school that clearly has an axe to grind with an in-state opponent that is much, much bigger. So we'll see.
I'll tell you this, because I also saw that I think it's Malik Murphy who is
not healthy, not
available.
No,
the recent 4-star recruit on the roster, freshman. I'll tell you this. It wouldn't surprise me if Roschon Johnson is in a couple of new meeting rooms this week during practice. Somebody with some quarterback experience, he's lined up there for Texas somewhat, came in with quarterback experience. Would not surprise me if Roschon Johnson is asked to do even more under center. So, yeah, Texas in a letdown spot against a dangerous team, clearly an outmatched UTSA team, but we've both rooted, and you might be about to root for, a team that does not have a quarterback on the level of surrounding talent, and it's tough. It's tough. So Texas looks to be taking a nice step forward, especially if Quinn Ewers is what he showed himself to be early on against Alabama. Now, it might just be that, the familiarity with Alabama is a big advantage for Texas, and that was the best that they'll look at times with Quinn Ewers, just because that home environment, you get up for a game in ways unlike you will for other games. But no, I think Texas fully healthy with Quinn Ewers can be very, very good. I also hesitate to say all of the issues that they had last year have been solved.
They're
because
just evaporated, right?
An almost half we saw with Quinn Ewers. That's the problem. A very solid quarter. So that's, you take the good, you take the bad, and the truth is somewhere in between. But no, as it relates to Quinn Ewers, the upside seems incredibly high, and Texas should win many, many games with him fully healthy.
I personally am excited about the new Chaz era at Texas.
Okay.
I'm excited to have another Chaz in Texas.
Yeah. Both of your teams, hopefully for you, starting Drews, right? In the near future. We could see Ty with a double Drew by the end of the season.
Double Drew. Anything else here
for you
in the news department?
No. What, do you have anything else down in your document? I think that's it.
I don't. Shall we get to our game?
Let's get to our game.
Explain it.
All right. Ty, the term bound has multiple meanings. So the name of our game today is Bound or Bound. So are you glory bound, or are you tied up a little bit? Are you getting tied up? I mean, if you're bound, Ty, you're tied up. You're quite literally physically tied up, right? Shout out Kanye West in that weird music video, Bound 2. So we have a number of topics, and we're going to look at different teams and situations bound for glory or just going to eventually get tied up. And no, Ty, get your mind out of the gutter. Yep. I'm not talking about the seminal Gina Gershon, and Jennifer Tilly movie from 1996, directed by the Wachowskis, by the way.
Really?
Of Matrix fame? Yeah. Written and directed by the Wachowskis. Had no idea.
I didn't know that.
No clue. I did not know that. I could have pulled a clip. I could have pulled a clip of Jennifer Tilly with her distinctive voice saying, "I'm trying to seduce you." But I didn't, because I'm a mature gentleman.
We're going to have to settle for your rendition.
Bound.
Yeah. Those were the days when you had the movie trailer guy who would actually narrate the trailer in a world.
Yeah.
So let's start with our first item, bound for glory or just simply bound. Ty, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. We mentioned J.J. McCarthy and new presumed starter J.J. McCarthy in Michigan. Donovan Edwards beat up, unclear the severity of his injury at the moment we're recording this, but does J.J. McCarthy now make Michigan the Big Ten favorite? So going to beat Ohio State again this year in Columbus. Does J.J. McCarthy and his presumed heightened ceiling for this offense make Michigan at his best the presumptive, because you've been on the record, stating Ohio State is not just your Big Ten champion, but your national champion.
That's
I
right.
don't think you've wavered from that, to your credit. Is Michigan, under J.J. McCarthy, presumed starter, bound to repeat as a Big Ten champion?
No, they are not.
Okay. Make the case for me that this changes nothing in terms of where you stood before the season.
I can't make the case that it changes nothing because I do think it changes something. I think it makes the offense more dynamic. It gives them additional ways that they can attack not just Ohio State, but really anybody on the schedule. I think this makes Michigan's offense better. Absolutely better.
Yeah.
I still don't think it makes it better than Ohio State's.
Okay.
And that's where I'm at with this. So if we were to put a number on it, and let's say before the start of the season, I had Ohio State with its dynamic offense 10 points better than Michigan, I think this brings it down about half that. I think J.J. McCarthy's worth a lot, provided he can stay healthy and he's not going to make any dumb mistakes. That was the big calling card for Cade McNamara, right? Mm-hmm. He may have been limited physically with the tools that he brought to bear, but he didn't make a lot of dumb mistakes. He knew how to run the offense. You could trust him with the football. He knew his limitations.
Totally.
But he wasn't going to beat you. If J.J. McCarthy can give them that level of consistency, and he's also got that dual threat component of his game, yeah, that makes Michigan a lot better. So let's put it this way. No, it doesn't make them the presumptive Big Ten favorite. I don't think it makes them good enough on offense or good enough in general to beat Ohio State because, like you said, I'm on the record, Ohio State, in my view, is going to win the national championship.
Right.
But I am definitely thinking about that stance a lot more than I did 3 weeks ago because JJ definitely gives them more. And I'll be interested to watch him mature throughout the course of the season.
Here's the thing, though, about Ohio State. And I think Ohio State is excellent. I think they have a terrific ceiling, higher than last year, perhaps. Schedule outside of Michigan isn't amazing. It's a tough schedule. It's at Michigan State, and it's before a bye week. They have Iowa, which is less daunting at the moment.
Correct.
It's at Penn State, at Northwestern, which I'm not selling Northwestern as a true threat to Ohio State, but I'm just talking about the road slate. At Maryland, which will probably be improved, but doesn't have the defense, I don't think, to stop Ohio State for very long. And then Michigan. I think Michigan's schedule is a little bit easier because the Michigan State game is where this year? It's in Ann Arbor, is it not?
I believe so, yeah.
The Penn State game is in Ann Arbor. And so leading up to it, I know they have Illinois should be a win. Nebraska almost definitely should be a win. Rutgers, you're Rutgers Scarlet Knights, Ty. You have a good claim to them.
On the road.
Yeah, Michigan's at Iowa, which I'm terrified of still if I'm a Michigan fan. Iowa can win that game 6-3. But the J.J. McCarthy factor, one of the things that I think we're overlooking right now is Jim Harbaugh beat up on Ryan Day last year. He turned the tables. He can get turned back. But I still think there's a certain amount of confidence, even with the new coordinators, and with what returns on both sides of the ball. Ohio State's still new on defense.
Yeah.
They're still new on defense in that system. We'll see how they respond. There's
they
a lot
won't
of
be.
games left.
They won't be by
the time they play.
late November, but fair point.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of consistency, continuity to Michigan that we'll see with Jackson Smith and Jigba's injury. He should be back and fine. But there are new pieces. And if J.J. McCarthy he reminds me a little bit. I think he has a stronger arm than Marcus Mariota. The long strider, the dual threat. Like, we think J.J. McCarthy, if what he has shown is legit against nobody, to be clear, against nobody. But if he has that all Big Ten, all American, Heisman caliber ceiling, if he's healthy, he has the skill talent, he has the line to do so. And they beat him last year with a better quarterback this year, or better quarterback potential. I'm going to plant my flag now and say yes.
Wow.
I'm going to plant my flag right now and say,
spoken like the true husband of a Michigan alum.
I mean, I just have a deeper connection to the program, Ty, and you're an outsider.
I am. I am. Now, look, I'm rooting for him.
Two excellent quarterbacks. The game goes through Columbus, but right now, because of what I think Michigan's defensive ceiling is, and I think Ohio State's defense will be very good too. I understand that. And the continuity involved, roster-wise, I'm going to say Michigan. I'm going to plant my flag and
Wow.
say CJ
Okay.
Stroud, special. JJ McCarthy, probably special. But what my bet here is that there is something in the air with Michigan, and I'm still down on Jim Harbaugh long-term in Ann Arbor. But with what we've seen thus far from JJ McCarthy, once again, against nobody, I'm going to have a little faith to say the upgrade from Cade McNamara to JJ McCarthy is meaningful for a team that should still get it done on defense. And there are still questions to me with Ohio State that need to be answered. That's all.
I think that's a fair point of view. And
Yeah.
as you said, Jim Harbaugh did beat up on Ohio State last year.
Yep.
Right? We've talked about it time and again. The more physical teams on that Ohio State schedule last season were the ones that had the most success against them.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not they toughen up, we'll find out in due time. We'll find out in due time how this front looks as they get into some of the meat of the schedule here in the Big Ten. But certainly, I think we would both agree, J.J. McCarthy being the quote-unquote true dual threat that he is at quarterback for Michigan gives them a different dynamic that is another thing anybody's got to account for, whether it's Ohio State on the road or Penn State or Michigan State or even Iowa, right? I mean, it does change the complexion of this a little bit, and it is something that we need to reevaluate as we go forward.
Here's the other thing, and this is not based in data. This is not based in anything significant.
This is Danalytics, right?
This is Danalytics. Each offseason, you are seduced intellectually by a new coordinator hire.
Me?
Each offseason, you are seduced
Yep.
by a new coordinator hire somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I am too haunted by the repeated notion that Kirk Shiraka is going to boost Penn State's offense in a new and exciting way. And you have been touting the Jim Knowles hire all off season long, and I know you're all in. I know you and Jim Knowles bound at the hip. That scares me. It scares me that you have said the words Jim and Knowles 147 times.
I have
this offseason.
I have.
And so while you say no to Michigan being the presumptive Big Ten favorite, I say,
honey.
I'm just planting my flag now with a little bit of pixie dust faith, but
All right.
the best of JJ McCarthy, I'm in. I'm seduced.
I
Sorry.
say better, but not bound to that level of success. So like half bound. I don't know if you got a sound for that.
It's the continuity of the skill position guys for Michigan. Look, and Ohio State's better off skill position wise. I understand all of that, but I don't know. There's a certain amount of new pressure on Ryan Day at Ohio State.
All right. Hey, speaking of new pressure,
Yeah.
USC.
Oh, okay.
USC bound for Pac-12, maybe even playoff stardom
Mm-hmm.
in light of their hot start and excitement in and around the program, or bound to remain what USC has been for the last decade. And I don't say that to be mean, but this is what they've been for the last decade, a team that gets hyped up and then doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Bound or bound?
Bound.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, the thing that worries me is you can run on USC. The thing that worries me is the red zone defense and needing turnovers, needing pick sixes to flip fields. And it's an incredible thing to be able to accomplish against Stanford and Rice. Not something you can count on week in, week out. They have an Oregon State team, I believe, this week in Corvallis. Is that who USC has?
USC, USC does not, I don't believe USC plays
Really?
Oregon State.
Oh, is that in 2 weeks? Who
2
do they have
weeks.
this? Oh, they have Fresno this week.
Fresno
Excuse me.
this
In
week.
2 weeks.
Excuse
Yeah.
me, yeah.
They have Fresno this week, Oregon State in a couple weeks. There is a concern to me with USC still. It's the same one that we both had in the offseason. It's the defense. It's that you can push them around, and that maybe the best thing that any team does in the conference is USC playing offense. I still don't fully trust the running game with Travis Dye leading the way. He is just, you touch him, he goes down. He's a good running back. I watched him for many years at Oregon. He is not breaking tackles. And so if USC needs to win in multiple ways, defense, running, whatever, if it's just going to be a shootout to get to 54, they've got a great chance. I'm still worried about them up front on defense. Not that the Pac-12 is an incredibly difficult conference right now to win. Even with Utah's loss, I think Utah is the clear favorite and Utah is still glory bound, where USC is going to be tied down a little bit like a hot air balloon. All that heat, but kind of easy to keep down with a rope. I'm saying USC not bound for presumptive glory in the Pac-12. But if they improve on defense, I can adjust that in the coming weeks. But right now, I think USC as a top 10 team is an overshoot, Ty.
Travis Dye, by the way, for what it's worth, I've got the number in front of me. Yeah. And it's early. He's only had 19 rushing attempts so far.
Okay.
Yards after contact, 1.6 is his average. So to your point,
he goes down. Yeah.
He goes down. Austin Jones, the other transfer, comes over from Stanford, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Much healthier number on the rushing side, 5.8. But your point, I think, is a valid one, and I also agree. Look, I've been high on Utah all offseason as well, and I do think that the Stanford game, and we'll find out more, right? Not just with Stanford and how we saw them move the ball relatively easily against USC, but we'll again see this defense against a pretty good offense in Fresno State this week. 2 weeks, Oregon State, on the road in Corvallis, Oregon State.
That's danger. That's West Coast Carrier Dome.
We know that Jonathan Smith is riverboat gambler of sorts, and he is not afraid to throw everything at USC. We will find out here in very short order what this defense is made of and if they are taking any kind of step forward. I am a bit nervous about how easily Stanford moved the ball, if only because we talked a lot about how Stanford wasn't going to be able to move the ball.
Right.
That was a question that we had. Now, Tanner McKee found open guys. He didn't get much help in the receiver game. Maybe if he did, it would have been a little bit of a closer matchup. But this is not an offense that you and I looked at and said, oh my God, everybody's afraid of Stanford. It's like an average offense, if that. Over the course of the college football season, I think we'll see those numbers bear themselves out. So for sure, you go up against a really physical team like a Utah. I just think it's different. I'm not saying they lose that game, but
right.
I'm just not sold on this defense at all. The offense is, as you said, maybe the best thing in all of the Pac-12, bar none. They're incredible.
Yeah.
They're incredible. But against a team that can really control the point of attack, against a team that can dominate the football, against a team that can really run it down your throat the way we know Utah can, I don't know how USC matches up in that type of contest. So for me, USC's better. Again, USC's going to be way better. There's a ton of steam on that program. It's exciting times.
Totally.
But Pac-12 champion, I still go Utah. I like the way that they match up a lot better.
It seems like every year, excellent teams have to win a very specific kind of clunker. Yeah. You know, a 17-13 game, a 15-10 game. And I anticipate USC is going to score a ton of points. But if some defensive coordinator in the conference, or even if it's Al Golden and Marcus Freeman, who are like, screw it, we have discovered, and I know that doesn't affect their conference championship aspirations, but whatever. If they have to win a specific game for a playoff berth, for a Pac-12 championship game berth, and they have to win it 15-10, that defensive coordinator finds this one wrinkle, blah, 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 blah. That's what worries me. Yeah. Is the ways in which USC can win games are not necessarily sustainable to get to 10 or 11. But again, it's the Pac-12, and I'm willing to hear you out. But it's sort of a bummer because it keeps us from appreciating the step forward that USC is very clearly taking, or the steps forward USC is very clearly taking.
Big time.
But at the same time, I think they're ground bound a little bit more than the ranking would suggest at the moment.
I think we agree. All right, let's move on. Let's go back east here.
Let's do it.
And this is a more zoomed out discussion than just one conference.
Mm-hmm.
This is a state of affairs type of question. And we're talking about the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yes.
Through 2 weeks, Georgia has predictably looked unstoppable. I don't know if anybody could have predicted how unstoppable they would look against Oregon. We still don't know a lot about Oregon, but that was an impressive showing by any stretch of the imagination. Is it now a situation where it is the Georgia Bulldogs essentially versus the field for the national championship this season?
Right. Yeah, it's not a question of playoff national championship. It's how many other teams appear to be bulletproof at the top of the sport? Whether it's six teams, 8 teams, 11 teams, 3 teams, whatever. I say none. Like, you look at Georgia's schedule right now. I don't know actually how good Georgia is, because I think Oregon is a pretty flawed team at the moment and will be for probably as long as Bo Nix is the quarterback. Like, even against Eastern Washington, they weren't throwing the ball downfield against Eastern Washington, which is kind of concerning. And so we don't fully know who the receivers are they're going to step up. Could be, A.D. Mitchell and Karras Jackson, Ladd McCulley. They have guys who have been there and done that. But short of those 2 tricky games in November, where I think they're on the road at Kentucky and at Mississippi State.
Correct.
If that's what we're pointing to right now, at Kentucky and at Mississippi State in terms of regular season, because we have a down Auburn team, and then the rest of their schedule is down. Florida's down. Florida's less of a threat after this past week. You can see how Georgia could very much frustrate Anthony Richardson in his first year as a full-time starter. I can listen on Ohio State. They still worry me a little bit. They still worry me a little bit because of the lack of pop in big games recently.
Sure.
So I say yes. I say the portal has changed things. I say the amount of change at Alabama has changed things. And Texas might be very good. And to go to Texas and beat Texas like they did could turn out to be super duper impressive. But right now, the SEC is kind of a countdown to Bama, Georgia in the SEC championship game already. It's like, I would say like, oh, it'd be great if Georgia got Arkansas or something like that. They beat them 37-0 last year.
They killed them. Yeah, I mean, here's the interesting thing about this. So, though I do believe that Ohio State can win the national championship, Georgia, with the way that they have played, has earned the right to be a definitive yes to this question, which is it Georgia versus the field? That is how we should look at this for the remainder of the season. Ohio State could get there, but until proven otherwise, Georgia is still the national champion, and they are playing still at a very, very high level. They are playing national championship caliber football. They have not skipped a beat since last season. If you look at their schedule, and you mention the 2 tricky road games in November, I think you're wise to point both those out. But I've got neutral field projections in front of me.
Okay.
And the hardest remaining game on Georgia's schedule, per this, is second to last week of the year on the road at Kentucky. And again, neutral site, they'd be about a 2-touchdown favorite. So in Kentucky, that translates to what? 11, 12 points, still a road favorite. Even that Mississippi State game, which I don't think Mississippi State has any chance against Georgia. I think they're way too one-dimensional. They've got a good defense, and we'll talk much more about Mississippi State on the road at LSU on the show that we do tomorrow. But even in that game, same deal, like a 15-point favorite neutral site. This is a really good Georgia team. All the other games on this schedule, I see a couple 47-point projections here, a 28-point projection, 17 over Tennessee, 23 over Florida. We're talking about a team that presumably, barring injury, barring any kind of catastrophe, is going to be a heavy favorite over just about every other team on its regular season schedule, even over Alabama at this point. I can pull up some other numbers and figure out what that would look like. They may not be favored right now, but I think with what we saw at Alabama, there's a lot more learning to do on that front. Is there not? I mean, we joke around about Baylor playing a pickleball offense and everything being relatively close to the line of scrimmage. Alabama didn't prove they can stretch the field.
True.
Right? So maybe there's a pickleball quality there that
Jace McClellan stretched it against
But in the passing game, right?
In the passing game.
In the passing game, everything was pretty contained. I don't know if that continues. I don't believe it will, but the point stands here that with Georgia's remaining schedule and just with the body of work we've seen from other teams around college football, they seem to be the clear number one at this point. And it is everybody else trying to contend to, to rise in that field category.
So these are the teams since 2000, and you can go back further, and it doesn't really make... Nebraska repeated in 94, 95. Miami got back to the national championship and lost to Ohio State, if you remember, in 2002? Yes, right? 2002. Yep. So it's really hard to repeat. Bama did it 11 and 12. But there is something that, especially with the added game, and Georgia's built for added games, just in terms of their depth, betting against a repeat champion generally pays off.
It usually works pretty well, doesn't it? Yeah.
It generally pays off.
Yeah.
And Alabama got to that game in 2012 as a good team, but not great team. But they had a Notre Dame team that was beatable. And there's a couple of teams that 2012 is, I mean, my team included, a nightmare to think about because that was the best. That's probably the best Oregon team ever. Betting against a repeat national champ is a good bet. And so things have aligned pretty well for Georgia at the moment, but all it takes is losing that SEC championship game and having the rest of the sport turn out in some sort of weird way and say, do we want a one-loss Utah team that has blasted everybody since losing to Florida, or are we just going to let Georgia in, even losing the SEC championship game? I suspect it's going to be the latter, that Georgia will still get in, but, we'll see what happens in the rest of the sport. Right now, to me, I have fewer questions about Georgia than I do anybody else.
I would agree 100%.
And a lot of that has to do with their schedule and how it shapes up. It just does. But there's that rat poison thing. There is that rat poison thing where no team is bulletproof. No team can say with certainty, there's just nobody going to challenge us. Georgia could beat everybody by 45 and just randomly lose to Florida, randomly lose to Mississippi State or Kentucky. That just Stetson Bennett gets hurt the week before and they can't figure out quarterback, which Kirby does have somewhat of a history of doing, not being able to figure out who the guy is and how to manage that quarterback room, and just sort of stumbled into Stetson Bennett. I don't think it's a certainty.
Yeah,
but right now, Ohio State's the closest to me. Yeah. Ohio State's the closest. Alabama you can't discount at all because it's early on in the season and there's a lot of time for them to get better in an SEC West that isn't doing a lot for me. The SEC is arguably the most boring conference in America right now because we're already trying to sim ahead to Georgia, Alabama.
We are, but I sort of disagree to this extent.
Okay.
Bama looking vulnerable against Texas in the manner that they did was really telling to me. If you had told me that Bama got into a shootout with Texas, that would have been way more believable than Bama scored 20 points against Texas. Yeah. This is a Texas team that
needed to hustle to get to 20. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a Texas team, Dan. Surely we cannot forget the fact that over the last 5 years, we have been dunking on the Longhorns because they can't tackle.
Yeah.
We talked about it in our preview, at least I did. If you can't tackle Alabama, you have no shot of winning that game.
Yeah.
So suddenly this defense found itself or played inspired football. I don't know what got into them, but perhaps that signals some real growth on their part, or perhaps it also signals something that we should look a little bit deeper with respect to Alabama. Maybe the big play potential is not fully developed yet. Maybe this team on offense is a little bit more vulnerable than we expected. I remember when we talked about Alabama in our Spring Snapshots episode, and one of the beat writers, I forget who, forgive me, mentioned the fact that Bryce Young got sacked a ton in that game, and there were real questions about who's Bryce Young throwing to. What is the support system around Bryce Young outside of Jahmyr Gibbs? Am I saying that it's danger zone time for Alabama? No. Alabama is going to be Alabama. They'll be fine. But I think it's a real question to ask. Like, who are his targets out wide? We know their names, but who is going to step up and be the dude that can stretch the field and give them that pop that they seemingly need that we didn't see against Texas? I think the SEC is probably less boring now than I expected at the start of the season because a vulnerable Alabama, a vulnerable Texas A&M, which is an altogether different topic that we'll talk about tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's more vulnerability in the West than I had even thought possible, and we know that through 2 weeks of the season. So it might be Georgia just nuking everybody on the eastern side of the conference, but the West could be really, really intriguing.
So, okay. Saying Alabama is not the Alabama of yore, right?
I mean, they're still an 11-win team. Don't get me wrong. But a more vulnerable Alabama at least makes week to week a little bit more interesting.
Well, didn't we had that kind of conversation last year after the Florida game, right? That they snuck out of Gainesville with the win, and then they demolished everybody.
There is a zombie Alabama factor here. I don't have my soundboard's dead at the moment, but
it's not the only year in which you could have credibly said, I don't know, Alabama looks more vulnerable than usual.
I know.
And then it's one of those things too, by the way, that looking vulnerable early on and having the advantage of saying, okay, this is what we know we need to work on and get creative with and find answers for now rather than week 9 is a big deal advantage when you're as deep and you have 442 analysts to pour over film and practice footage and whatever, that there is an argument to be made that we should just say, I think they're going to figure it out.
They will
because if
figure it out.
anybody has repeatedly figured it out and made everybody forget that 1 week or those 2 weeks where they looked mortal, is probably Nick Saban in Alabama with a Heisman winning quarterback.
It's a fair point. So on the topic here of
Yeah.
is it Georgia versus the field, we agree that is
Yes.
the answer, right?
Yes. As of this moment,
Yes.
you can lump Alabama in with the powers across the rest of the sport that look excellent but have reasonable questions.
Correct.
I think that, like, you look at the ACC, you look at the Big Ten, you look at the Big 12, you look at the Pac-12, you look at the Sun Belt. Obviously, I'm just lumping in power conferences right now. That you look at the powers across, they all look very, very good, but have questions. Whereas Georgia, less so. So yes, right now, I say at the top of the sport, you get past number 3, number 4, like, yeah, Clemson might play defense better than anybody does anything. But it's only half of the equation.
Only half the equation. All right, we've got one more question here before we call it a day. What this is like a multi-pronged question, right?
I'm ready for it.
We've got a question here about Texas and Oklahoma with specific regard to the pending move to the SEC.
Yeah. So after 2 weeks and basically no sample size, let's update our firmware on how we feel about the whatever happens with the move to the SEC.
Which of these two teams is bound for greater immediate success? Immediate success upon joining the SEC whenever the hell that happens.
Oklahoma.
Explain.
I am more confident in Brent Venables consistently figuring out defense than I am Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma has the reputation, an earned reputation, by the way, of really struggling on that side of the ball. I think they'll be able to do a lot more on defense, and the recruitment and commitment of, is it Jackson Arnold for Oklahoma. I think it's going to take a minute to fully prove that, you know, under Jeff Lebby and Brent Venables, that the offense can be nearly as potent as they were at their best with Lincoln Riley. But in the SEC, I still believe, and I believe this anywhere, that if you are going to be a consistent power, it's going to start on defense. And I think Oklahoma is going to be closer to inspiring that for me. But, man, Texas has an opportunity. But at the same time, there's too much off the field right now for Texas in the way that that program is structured and the number of voices in important Texas rooms that have consistently made Texas a more difficult place to win than it should be. And now with the added pressure of the SEC spotlight, I think Texas just has the history of getting in its own way more.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma is better built to function as a well-oiled machine that everybody wins at Oklahoma. And basically nobody wins at Texas in the mod. Like, Mac Brown had a stretch, and still it was, 2 Big 12 titles? So I just think you have to tip in the direction, you have to point in the direction of the place that has figured out how to cultivate a winning program with multiple guys. And to me, that's existing in Norman in a more profound way than it does in Austin.
So I think generally your logic is in a good place here.
Okay.
I think it's in a good place. And, you know, one of the things we talked about a lot in the preseason was Brent Venables, for all of the reputation that precedes him as a really good coach and obviously an Oklahoma guy, somebody who's been there before, and his level of comfort in and around that program, how that's a good thing. We still have not seen him coach in big games at a really high level from the head coaching spot. I'm not going to sit here and act as if Nebraska, a traditional rival, by the way, I'm not going to act like the game in week 3 is any kind of quote unquote big game, but it is
real
significant.
Team, real team. Yeah.
It's a real team. And for what it's worth, the people who bet for a living are betting pretty heavily on Nebraska. Does not mean they will win. But
what's the number?
The number was 13.5, and now it's down to about 11. And it seems like it might come down a little bit more. Again, double-digit favorite.
Yeah.
But I think there is some real skepticism around Brent Venables. What can you do on offense? They started off to they got off to a really bumpy
slowish start, last week
against Kent. I think Oklahoma will be fine. And if you look at the recruiting rankings, recruits think Oklahoma's going to be fine too, because they're a top 5 class right now at time of recording in 2023. Texas is also the top 5. They're at number 2.
Dude, these last 2 Texas, the Kelvin Banks thing at left tackle, to have a locked in All-American caliber left tackle as a true freshman, damn, Texas, good job.
It's a good spot to be in.
Yeah.
I think that the recruiting ceiling is higher at Texas. For sure.
But it's always been.
And has that not been the issue for the Longhorns over all these years?
Yeah.
It's been a matter of developing the talent. The talent's always there. It's in their backyard. It's turning it into wins that has really given all these coaches so many issues. So I am encouraged to see that the recruiting has recovered under Steve Sarkisian. And if what we saw last week against Alabama is any indication, perhaps the defense is on the road to recovery as well. That would definitely bode well for them as they move into the SEC.
Sure.
But the answer right now, again, keyword, short-term success in the SEC. Short-term, I think you've got to answer Brent Venables in Oklahoma. Even though I am not fully sold on him yet, I am sold on his ability to coach a defense. And, I think we'll see it before the end of the year. We'll definitely see it in some of the bigger games that they play in their upcoming Big 12 schedule. I think his ability to coach defense makes Oklahoma the only answer for this question. Even though longer term, if Texas gets its ducks in a row, can find the right guy that, jives with the alumni and the donors and whatnot. Longer term, I think Texas is higher upside, but shorter term, because of the propensity to coach defense and because everything just feels really stable in Norman, the only answer is Oklahoma.
Yeah, the alignment to me is such a big deal.
It is.
That there are too many places that we see throughout the sport where, why aren't they winning more? Why aren't they winning more conference championships? Why don't they win more 10-game seasons? Why don't they put together more 10-win seasons? Why aren't they doing this? This is Miami. This is USC. This is Nebraska. This is Tennessee. And then the teams that do win it with multiple coaches, there's something different. There's a certain amount of pressure. There's a certain amount of maturity. I'm not going to say Oklahoma because no program is mature. No fan base is mature. No booster group is mature. But it is that alignment. It is the organization. There is something about Oklahoma that Texas has not figured out a way to tap into that kind of year-over-year alignment. And I don't see it changing. There's a reason places are what they are. And I think Texas can have incredible years, but in the way that we talk about, what does your 5th best pass look like? What does your 7th best run look like? What does your 4th best game look like? What does your 4th best season look like? I'm just going to go with OU for that. There's just too much evidence, even with a new coach and new everything, that the alignment behind the scenes is just better.
I would agree. I want to send a big shout out to all of our premium verballers who are listening, who are watching along live. Aaron.
Honey.
Aaron comments here that Texas is bound to its boosters. That's their biggest problem, which I think many of us would agree on that front. Big thank you to Jen, to Andrew, to Shay. Who else we got in here? We got a bunch of Danny, Kale, a bunch of folks who have been watching live throughout the course of this broadcast, which again, you can watch all of our live tapings if you are ever so inclined by going to verballers.com. It's one of our premium verballer offerings. We're going to do our part here to thank everybody as best we can for supporting the show, making all of this possible, allowing us to do this as our one and only gig. So there you have it. That is Bound and Bound for this here.
Honey.
Continue.
This here episode. Don't forget to go on out to solidgiveaway.com. I ordered the CJ Stroud signed mini helmet the other day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I got a note that it's going to be a little bit delayed, but it's still on the way.
Great.
It's still on the way. I saw that and my heart sank. I'm excited about this. Don't tell me that I got lost. It's not lost. We'll be fine. We're going to have the CJ Stroud helmet. I have not sent Michael Mayer out yet. He's behind me, but our Victor will be getting a notice about that shortly. CJ, his helmet's going to be behind me here on the video feed before long. We're going to draw a winner for that in mid-October. Go to solidgiveaway.com. Not only is it free to enter, now there is a repeat step that if you want to have even more chances to win, you just got to do something more than once. You could do it every day if you really want to, but you got to go to solidgiveaway.com if you want more info on that. And last but certainly not least, outside of all the other promotional stuff where we tell you to subscribe and follow on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the usual hotspots, solidverballive.com. I will put out a call one more time. We're excited about this show in New York City. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's always cool to meet people who support the show. Always cool to be out there and get a couple drinks and laughs with people who are also indoctrinated into the Solid Verbal Brotherhood. So solidverballive.com or Smell Ty's Hair. Let's be real.
SmellTy'sHair.com.
The URL also goes to the same place. We would encourage you if you're going to be in the area, if you are interested. We'd love to hang. It'll be fun.
Ty, I looked up
Bound.
and I just wanted to tell you this. The first week of its release, I'm always curious about these things. The first week of Bound's release, directed and written by the Wachowskis. These are the movies that were also out in theaters, making money.
Okay.
Here's some extra nuggets. You ready?
I'm ready.
The First Wives Club, The Glimmer Man, shout out Steven Seagal. That Thing You Do, D3, The Mighty Ducks, 2 Days in the Valley, shout out Charlize Theron, right? That's 2 Days in the Valley.
Yep.
Independence Day, Big Night with Stanley Tucci, First Kid, Crash, A Time to Kill with our
Do you
dear
say
personal
first
friend.
kid?
First Kid, Crash, A Time to Kill. That is McConaughey, right?
McConaughey, yeah.
That's our dear personal friend.
Early McConaughey.
Early McConaughey. The Nutty Professor, Tin Cup, Jack, if you remember, the Robin Williams joint, which nobody's ever described as a Robin Williams joint.
Never.
Courage Under Fire, Train Spotting, Kazam, starring Shaquille
Worst
O'Neal,
movie ever made. Worst movie ever made, Kazam.
Twister, The Rock, Mission Impossible, The Island of Dr. Moreau,
Wow.
Mission Impossible 1, Kingpin, Eraser, Striptease, and Super Cop. All at the same time in the theaters on some level in 1996.
Wow.
All of these movies available on the big screen. Holy hell. And we decide of all of those to highlight
Bound.
because that's who we are. That's who we are.
Wow. All right. Well, on that uplifting, make us feel old note, this has been another rousing rendition of the Solid Verbal. Thank you for tuning in, supporting, being part of our madness. We will be back tomorrow. We will preview week 3. In the meantime, for that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt, thank you so much for downloading, listening, and just being a good college football sport. We'll talk to y'all tomorrow. Stay solid.
Peace.